Alright, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about the state of Texas, because if you haven't heard, they are actually preparing to potentially secede from the United States. The Texas GOP has been preparing for a vote in 2023 that could reassert its status as an independent nation. Obviously, this is a pretty major development. If you didn't know, Texas is not just in terms of land size or anything like that, but in terms of population and economy, one of the biggest states in the United States. So any potential for Texas to secede from the Union would obviously have massive implications for a new country being Texas and also for the United States. As of right now, it's pretty unlikely that anything could actually end up happening here. I mean, they're going to vote on it apparently and whatnot, but at the end of the day, I don't really see this going anywhere, and I'll explain why in this video. If you didn't know also, this is not the first time that Texas has floated the idea of seceding from the United States. It seems like every year or so, they come through and they talk about, oh, we're going to secede from the United States. It seems like it just kind of comes along and goes as it goes because, like, nothing ever really happens. But apparently this time they're pretty serious about it, and this time they're actually going to try and take action on it and see if this is something that they want to do. So the Texas GOP is pushing for a referendum on seceding from the US, a split that could lead to the state becoming an independent nation. The state GOP outlined its intention to press for such a referendum in a document from its Platforms and Resolutions Committee, wherein it specified its demand that the state holds a vote on the matter. The document was produced in connection with the Texas Republicans Party convention in Houston, during which it also voted overwhelmingly to reject the legitimacy of the 2020 election. The document, which contains a section on state sovereignty, calls for the state to hold a vote and outlines the Texas Republican Party's opinion that the federal government has, quote, impaired its right to locally self-govern. Per the document, the Texas GOP proposed that any federally mandated legislation that infringes upon the 10th Amendment rights of Texas should be ignored, opposed, refused, and nullified. Texas retains the right to secede from the United States, and the Texas legislature should be called upon to pass a referendum consistent thereto, the document reads. So, like I said, this would have massive implications. First and foremost, Texas would be the newest country on planet Earth, obviously, and with that comes a lot of challenges. If you didn't know, Texas has its own power grid. It's not connected to the United States' national power grid, which means that Texas, in this capacity, is already pretty much ready to secede. The problem is, this power grid gets extremely overwhelmed during major weather crisis. Like during particularly bad winters, the power grid has been known to basically fail. It just did this a few years ago and it led to people dying. And obviously, if Texas were to secede from the United States, they would be fully responsible for their own power grid, and they would have to make the repairs and changes necessary to actually do something about this. On top of that, a lot of Texas's money that keeps the state afloat right now actually comes from federal tax dollars that are given to them by the United States government, which obviously, if they were to secede from the country, they would lose all of that federal funding, and it would basically put them in a position where the state could have a lot of money troubles. Now, of course, they do have one of the biggest individual economies in the United States when it comes to the states and everything, and it has a very respectable output and everything. It hasn't done enough to actually become independent and become, fully self-reliant and everything. On top of that, they also wouldn't have the military protections from the world's top military in terms of spending and firepower, which obviously is a pretty massive reason that you'd want to be in something like the United States in the first place. So really, there's not that many good things that can really come from this for Texas if they were to secede from the United States. It would eventually just put them in a position where they'd have to face the writing on the wall. There's just too many problems that Texas would have to deal with on their own in order to actually become a state and become not only a state, but one that can actually help itself in really any way for them to really do something like this, in my opinion. Now, of course, if you didn't know, the Civil War and also something else called, I believe, Texas versus White, if I'm not mistaken, which is a Supreme Court decision, have basically outlawed things like states leaving the Union. States are not allowed to leave the Union here in the United States. So there's a pretty good chance that if this were to happen, it would completely sour relations between a new country, Texas, and the United States, which is, well, still the world's dominant military and economic power, so that would be pretty problematic for Texas to begin with. Also, according to the Constitution, you're not allowed to leave the Union, so there's like a lot of reasons why they can't really do this, why they shouldn't really be able to do this, but it's definitely surprising to see the Republican Party in Texas be so overwhelmingly in favor, really, of actually leaving the Union, to the point where they're actually willing to vote on something like this and give it the time of day to even consider. Definitely a little mind-boggling. I mean, honestly, as an American, I gotta say, I don't think life here is that bad, you know? Like, to the point where I'd be like, oh, hey, Ohio, let's secede from the Union and become our own country, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know what would really make you want to leave the United States that bad. Like I said, I don't think life here is that horrible. I mean, definitely has gotten a lot worse over the last couple years with the, rise in prices for everything, but that's going on globally, you know? Apparently it's because they don't agree with the outcome of the 2020 election, which, I mean, I don't really think that that's something to leave the entire country over, right? I mean, if you disagree with the results or you think that it was fraudulent or something like that, I feel like there's much better ways to handle that and go about this than to just be like, hey, let's vote to leave the Union, right? But like I said, this is actually pretty commonplace. Like, I can remember at least, I think 3 other times at this point in my life where I've heard that Texas was considering seceding from the United States, right? Texas almost reminds me of, like, that teenager, that angsty teenager that gets in arguments with their parents and their first response is, fuck you guys, man, I'm leaving this place, bro. I'm out of here. I'm moving out, bro. Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Texas now because of how often they threaten to leave the United States, right? It would just cause too many problems. I don't really see this going down, but in the document, the Texas GOP also urged state lawmakers to bring a vote to the people of Texas to determine whether or not the state of Texas should reassert its status as an independent nation. Per the state GOP's proposal, this vote would be on the ballot in 2023. On top of its call for secession, the Texas GOP also asked for state lawmakers to look into prosecuting election fraud. Quote, we urge the passage of a constitutional amendment that gives the Texas Attorney General concurrent jurisdiction to prosecute election fraud along with the county district attorneys, the GOP's platform document read. While the Texas GOP has not outlined when exactly such a vote might take place, this is not the first occasion that the idea of secession has been floated. In November, Texas Senator Ted Cruz said the state might secede if the situation in the U.S. becomes hopeless. We're not there yet, and if there comes a point where it's hopeless, then I think we take NASA, we take the military, we take the oil, Cruz said. However, according to the Constitution, Texas is not able to unilaterally leave the Union. So, the thing about what Cruz said there is that it's extremely misleading. Obviously, Texas is not going to take NASA, considering it's a United States federally funded project. So no, you're not going to take NASA if you leave the United States. That belongs to us. You can create the Texas Space Agency or something like that, but NASA is not property of Texas. So no, you do not take that. Obviously, they don't take the military because that's once again also federally funded. So there's no way for them to quote unquote take the military. I don't know what he meant by that, but we take the oil. I guess they could take the oil in their own state and whatnot. I mean, that's up to them, but I don't see how that's really going to solve any of the headaches that they would have to address. And honestly, I don't know if Texas has the leadership to really pull this off in the first place. When you got people who think that they would take NASA over if they seceded from the United States running your state, I mean, I don't necessarily know if that's the best thing for you, right? So at the end of the day, man, I don't really see Texas doing this. I think it's just a bunch more bullshit that they have put out. You know, they do this, like I said, every year. They always talk about seceding. It's just not going to happen. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shoptimus down below, and until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, while talking about Texas seceding and signing out.